Welcome to the re-narration of a presentation given by Fons Leroy and Jan van de Poele for the Synerjob conference in Brussels. This presentation is roughly divided into 3 parts. First, we'll quickly review why we want to work with competences. Then we look at the main challenges of working with competences. And finally, we look at a demo that illustrates how we could work with competences. So, why competences? When you look at the job market, simply through the eyes of professions, it looks a bit like this. The overlap between the pool of job seekers and the pool of vacancies is quite limited. However, if you look at it through competences, it becomes much easier to see the overlap. Another way to look at it is to compare 2 professions. Take, for example, a solar panel installer and a car mechanic. In the current matching system, these 2 jobs simply don't match. But if we look at their competence profile, we can compare them. Here we can clearly see the affinity between the 2. Having this clearer picture also allows better matching and more targeted training. So to recap, competences allow better matching because we have more data points. The pattern of data points allows us to discover affinities between related jobs, and it allows us to better target our training. But there are some challenges. The 3 core ones are common instruments and standards, how we capture information, and how do we move from a culture of professions to a culture of competences. Let's look at each of these in greater detail. Standards are needed if we are to exchange data between organizations and avoid reinventing the wheel. At this moment, there are lots of organizations that are working on various standards for competences. There is ESCO, ISCO, Room 3, Competent, and more. In Belgium, the 4 labour organizations are aiming to work with Competent. This will allow us to exchange data and improve our interregional mobility. Competent is based on Room 3 and is enriched with input from the local job market. It is also validated by the different sectors and social partners. Competent will also be used by certification organizations, employment services like Synerjob partners, training centers, but also by education institutions. This will help make the transition from school life to career a bit smoother. To ensure data interoperability on a European level, each of the national standards can exchange data via the ESCO standard. The general philosophy we work under is to use common instruments with job profiles and competences that are validated by social partners. The use of competences means more data to capture, but we can make it as light as possible. Capture as much data as possible behind the scenes, invisible to the user. Don't force the user to work with competences, but make it compelling and direct why he should. And when we need to ask for data, we should try to ask for as little as possible. Make it the most relevant data so we don't overwhelm the users. And of course, make sure the user interface is very simple to understand and use. Once capture is made simple and transparent and the user has direct benefits, the cultural problem melts away. Let's look how all this will work as seen from our users. Meet Jan. Jan is a young mechanic that, unfortunately for him, just got laid off in a restructuring. So he registers at VDAB as a job seeker. Now, one of the most important items in the registration process is the job he wants to do. In this case, Jan wants to work as a mechanic. He also has some experience doing the job. Now, once we know his level of experience, we can automatically derive a set of skills that he probably has. We now ask him to confirm those that are the most likely to vary from the norm. And in this case, we also see that GM, his former employer, has validated some of his skills. Once he has finished his other registration formalities, he arrives at his homepage. And there he gets two messages. One with a batch of jobs that have been matched with his profile, taking into account what he has filled in among his competences. And in the second message, again using competences, it becomes quite easy to see the affinities between different professions and to suggest new career paths to our job seekers. The green bar shows that Jan has already many of the skills needed to become a solar panel installer, a job he might not have thought of. He is curious enough to check out the course. Now, curious about the unexpected opportunity, he checks out the course he needs to obtain the competences he misses, and eventually he registers for the course. On the other side, we have Mark. Mark has a small company that installs solar panels. Mark is looking for extra staff, so he uses the online tool of VDAB to create a new vacancy. He is looking for a solar panel installer. Adds a description of the function, fills in some of the technical details, and then he indicates that he wants the job seekers to apply online. Once he has done so, we can show him a selection of skills that are most likely to vary from the norm. If Mark wants to, he can change the importance of certain competences, but he doesn't have to. Also note here in orange is a live count of the number of matching CVs. And now when he indicates that the solar panel installation skill is required, the number of CVs is updated live. The employer can also add competences directly to his vacancy, and again, the live count is updated. This allows the employer to adapt the vacancy to the reality of the job market. Let's match this job against the CVs. On the right-hand side here, you see each CV has a matching score that also indicates the level of trust in the competences. The dark green are scores that come from trusted sources, the medium greens are self-assessed skills, and light green scores are derived automatically from things like experience. Notice the French and Dutch CV. Indeed, working with competences on common base allows to work across borders and languages without extra work for translation. Jan is also in the results. Let's take a look at his CV. Here we see Jan's regular CV. We have a part about his education and a part about his work experience. But more interestingly, we can also see how his competences score against Mark's job offer. The top 4 competences here are scored by trusted sources, in this case Sintra and VDAB. The next ones are self-assessed, and the light green ones are directly derived from other data like experience. Mark decides that it looks good and sends Jan a message. Back to Jan. Jan is curious about the job. Maybe he will apply for it. Mark's message leads to the detail of the job description, and we see Jan applying for it. After writing a short letter, Jan is also asked to self-assess his skills. In this case, he has very little to do as most of the data can be grabbed from earlier captures. Jan applies for the job, and for the happy end of the story, Mark hires Jan. So, what have we now seen? Examples of capture from the initial registration, while creating a vacancy, and when applying for a job. Automatic capture behind the scenes, from education, from trainings, and based on experience. Examples of affinity in the training proposal message and in the job and CV matching. Self, trusted and automatic assessment. Data exchange with companies, across borders, with training organizations, with the Department of Education, and more. This ends the narrated version of the presentation. Thank you for listening.